The sun was shining brightly over the city park that afternoon. The air was warm and the light breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass. Families were scattered across the wide green spaces, some enjoying picnics on colorful blankets, others tossing frisbees or letting their children run freely across the open fields. It was one of those afternoons that felt peaceful, ordinary, and comforting. The kind of day when people left their worries behind, if only for a little while. Layla was among the visitors that day. She was 9 months pregnant and had recently suffered a minor leg injury that made walking difficult. That's why she used a wheelchair for mobility. Despite her condition, she loved being outside. The sun, the laughter of children, and the simple feel of life moving around her gave her a sense of freedom that she didn't often experience inside her apartment. She had her essentials in a small bag hanging from the wheelchair, along with a couple of groceries she had picked up from a nearby store. Her face wore a soft smile, though there was a hint of caution in her eyes, as she knew she had to be careful navigating the park pathways with her wheelchair. She moved slowly along the paved trail, carefully turning the wheels with her hands. Every so often she paused to wave at children who ran past her, or to nod at other parkgoers. She enjoyed observing the little moments around her, the way a father lifted his child onto his shoulders, or how a mother tried to chase her toddler who had taken off in the wrong direction. It was the kind of simple joy she wished to hold on to, a small moment of peace in what was otherwise a challenging stage of life. But that peace didn't last long. A sudden, sharp roar of a motorcycle engine shattered the calm of the park. Layla's head turned instinctively and her heart skipped a beat. From the corner of her eye, she saw a biker speeding recklessly along the pathway. He wasn't supposed to be riding through the crowded park. The trail was meant for pedestrians and cyclists moving slowly, but the biker didn't seem to care. He revved the engine loudly, weaving dangerously between walkers and children. People around him began shouting, waving their hands, trying to get his attention. Some jumped out of the way as the bike came dangerously close. Layla froze for a moment, panic rising in her chest. The biker was getting closer, moving faster with each passing second. She gripped the wheels of her chair, trying to maneuver out of the way, but the path was narrow and the ground beneath her wheels wasn't completely even. Before she could fully react, the biker lost control for a fraction of a second. That moment was all it took. The motorcycle hit the side of Layla's wheelchair with a sudden jolt. She was thrown off balance, toppling sideways, and her groceries scattered across the pathway. Plastic bags tore and apples rolled in every direction. People gasped and shouted as they rushed forward to help, some calling out in alarm. Layla cried out in pain, her hands instinctively clutching her stomach. She felt a sharp pain in her arm and her back, but the fear of what might happen to her baby made everything worse. Her heart was pounding and tears welled up in her eyes. The biker came to a stop just a few feet away, looking around nervously. For a brief moment, it seemed like he might apologize sincerely or at least check on her, but instead he muttered something under his breath, a careless, almost dismissive remark, and then revved his engine again. He sped off, leaving chaos behind him. The noise of the engine faded as quickly as it had appeared, but the echoes of shock and fear remained in the park. A few parkgoers immediately rushed to Layla's side. One woman knelt beside her, asking if she was okay. Another man helped gather the scattered groceries while calling out to see if she had been injured badly. Layla tried to catch her breath, feeling shaken and vulnerable. Her hands were trembling and she could hardly believe what had just happened. A moment ago, the park had been full of calm and happiness, and now it felt like a small storm had hit her life out of nowhere. "Are you hurt anywhere else?" one of the bystanders asked gently. Layla shook her head. Although the truth was she could feel bruises forming and the ache in her back was growing, but her attention was mostly on her stomach. She felt a wave of panic thinking about the baby she carried. What if the sudden jolt had caused harm? She pressed her hands against her belly, praying silently that everything was fine. Her breathing was uneven and she tried to calm herself, feeling the panic slowly mix with tears. Other people in the park began to gather around, murmuring about what had happened. Some were outraged at the recklessness of the biker, some worried about Layla, and a few were trying to call for help. Phones were raised, emergency services were dialed, and within moments the park was alive with movement again, only this time with concern rather than joy. Layla's mind was racing. She felt a mixture of fear, disbelief, and frustration. How could someone be so careless, so indifferent to the people around them? She had always been careful in public spaces, aware of the risks that could come from uneven paths or fast-moving bicycles. And yet, here she was, toppled into the dirt, groceries ruined, and her peace shattered by someone who seemed to think the rules didn't apply to him. She tried to focus on what she could control. She adjusted her position, slowly moving back into the wheelchair with the help of a passerby. Her legs were sore, her back ached, and her hands were scratched from gripping the chair and trying to brace herself during the fall. Every little movement reminded her of how fragile life could feel in a sudden moment of recklessness. Just as she was beginning to feel a little steadier, a tall figure appeared from the crowd. People around her started whispering, pointing in disbelief. It was hard to miss him. Broad shoulders, calm yet commanding presence, walking with confidence but also with care. It was John Cena, who happened to be nearby shooting a commercial. He had seen the commotion from a distance and had immediately moved toward it, sensing that someone needed help. John knelt beside Layla, keeping his voice gentle and steady. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked, his tone calm but firm. He carefully looked at her, making sure not to startle her further. Layla blinked, almost in disbelief. Here was a man she had seen on television, a figure she never imagined would appear in a moment like this, and yet, he was here, focusing only on her well-being. He helped her adjust her position, making sure she was comfortable and safe while waiting for the paramedics. He asked simple questions, careful not to overwhelm her, and his presence had a soothing effect. The fear and panic that had been gripping her slowly started to ease. Even in the middle of a traumatic incident, there was a sense of relief that someone genuinely cared. Someone with the courage to step in when others might have just watched. Layla's friends, who had arrived just moments later, were amazed at the scene. They had been rushing to find her after hearing about the accident, and when they saw John Cena speaking with her, helping her gather herself, they could hardly believe their eyes. The focus wasn't on fame or attention. It was on ensuring she was safe and reassured. Around them, the crowd continued to murmur, some whispering about the reckless biker who had caused the incident, others marveling at the kindness and calm of the man who had come to her aid. The park, which had moments ago been full of tension and shock, now had an undercurrent of hope. People began to help in small ways, picking up groceries, offering water, and keeping a respectful distance, understanding that this moment belonged to Layla and the stranger who had stepped in to help her. Layla could feel her heart gradually slowing down from the panic it had raced into earlier. Her hand still shook a little, but the fear that had been so consuming was replaced by gratitude and a sense of safety. She looked at John Cena, who gave her a reassuring nod and smile, and in that moment, she realized something important. Even in the middle of chaos, there were people willing to stand up, to act, and to care, no matter who you were or what the situation looked like. And in that small, quiet moment, surrounded by a growing circle of helpful strangers, Layla felt the first real sense of calm since the accident. She had been scared, vulnerable, and uncertain, but now there was hope, there was care, and there was the reminder that even in moments that seemed frightening and unfair, kindness could arrive when it was needed most. The commotion in the park hadn't entirely died down yet, but the focus had shifted. People who had initially been shocked were now offering help in small ways. Some picked up Layla's groceries, making sure the spilled apples, bread, and milk weren't ruined. Others cleared the path, forming a small circle to give her space. A few bystanders were quietly on their phones, calling emergency services or letting friends know what had happened. There was a shared sense of concern in the air, a communal feeling that someone had been hurt and needed care. Layla sat in her wheelchair, still trembling slightly from the shock of the accident. She pressed her hands gently against her stomach, feeling the rhythmic movement of her baby inside. A mixture of relief and worry coursed through her. Relief that the baby seemed to be okay, and worry about the sudden impact and how dangerous that moment could have been. Her breathing was still uneven, and tears continued to stream down her face. She felt raw, exposed, and vulnerable. A few people knelt beside her, speaking softly to help her calm down. "It's okay," one woman said. "You're safe now. Everything will be fine." Another person handed her a bottle of water, gently lifting it for her to sip. The little gestures made a big difference, giving Layla a sense of being cared for amidst the chaos. She was slowly realizing that even though the biker had acted recklessly, she wasn't alone. There were people around her willing to help, willing to show compassion in that difficult moment. John Cena remained close by, observing the scene carefully. He had already made sure that Layla was physically okay, but his attention now shifted to the surrounding crowd and the biker. Even from a distance, the man's recklessness had left a strong impression. Cena's presence was calm yet commanding, and the people around him instinctively respected it. He had a way of being strong without being aggressive, of stepping into a tense situation and diffusing it simply by being there. Layla's friends had arrived by now, rushing toward her with concern etched on their faces. One of them knelt down immediately, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice trembling with worry. Layla nodded weakly, unable to speak at first. The adrenaline from the accident still coursed through her veins, and it took her a few moments to find her words. I think so," she managed to say, her voice shaky. Just a little scared." Her friends helped her adjust in the wheelchair, ensuring she was seated comfortably. They offered words of reassurance, telling her that everything would be all right and that they were glad she was unharmed. The mixture of relief and lingering fear created a strange emotional weight. She was grateful for the help, yet the memory of being knocked over by the biker made her heart race again. Nearby, other parkgoers watched the scene unfold with varying reactions. Some were shaking their heads in disbelief, commenting on how irresponsible it was for someone to ride a motorcycle through a crowded park. Others were quietly amazed at John Cena's calm intervention, whispering to one another about how unusual it was to see someone of his stature show genuine care in such a moment. It wasn't about fame or attention. He had stepped in purely to make sure Layla was safe and the situation didn't escalate further. As paramedics arrived, the crowd parted slightly, giving them space to assess Layla. She was grateful for their presence, feeling a mix of relief and exhaustion. The paramedics asked her simple questions, checking her vitals and making sure the baby was fine. Layla tried to answer calmly, though her hands still shook slightly as she clutched the edges of her wheelchair. Her friends remained close, supporting her and whispering comforting words. The sense of community and support helped ease some of her fear. Meanwhile, the biker was nowhere to be found. Some people had tried to follow him briefly, but he had disappeared down a side street before anyone could reach him. The parkgoers were frustrated and angry, knowing that the man's recklessness could have caused serious harm. Yet despite the anger, there was also a sense of resolve. People wanted to make sure Layla was safe, and that the incident was reported properly so that it wouldn't happen again. John Cena stayed by her side through most of this process. He knelt, maintaining eye contact with her and speaking softly, his tone steady and reassuring. "You're doing great," he said. "Everything's okay now. You're safe, and help is here." His presence was grounding, a reminder that even in a moment of fear there were people willing to stand by and support those in need. Layla couldn't help but feel a mixture of awe and gratitude. It wasn't every day that someone who could be anywhere doing anything chose to stop and care for a stranger. The paramedics finished their initial checks and informed her that physically, she and the baby appeared unharmed. That news brought a wave of relief she could hardly put into words. She let out a long breath, her shoulders relaxing slightly for the first time since the accident. Even though she still felt shaken, the knowledge that everything was okay gave her a newfound strength. Her friends helped her slowly roll to a nearby bench, giving her a moment to rest and regain her composure. The small gestures of care, handing her tissues, offering water, steadying her wheelchair, made her feel less vulnerable. She realized that in moments of crisis it wasn't always about grand actions. Sometimes the simplest acts of kindness could make the biggest difference. As she sat there recovering, her mind began to process everything that had happened. The fear, the shock, and the suddenness of the biker's recklessness contrasted sharply with the calm and care she was now receiving. It was a strange mixture of emotions: anger at the situation, fear for the moment that had passed, relief for the safety of her baby, and gratitude for those who had stepped in to help. John Cena remained nearby, speaking occasionally to her and her friends, ensuring that she felt supported and understood. He encouraged her to focus on her breathing, to take slow, deep breaths to calm her racing heart. His presence wasn't imposing. It was comforting, steady, and reassuring. People watching from a distance could see how genuinely involved he was in making sure Layla was okay. The crowd gradually began to disperse as the immediate concern subsided. People returned to their activities, but a few stayed nearby, keeping an eye on her from a distance. There was a subtle sense of community, an understanding that while life in the park had resumed its normal pace, moments like these left an impression that lingered. Everyone had witnessed a mix of fear, compassion, and humanity in one short span of time. Layla's friends continued to support her, helping her gather her scattered groceries and checking her wheelchair for damage. Small scratches on the frame were visible, but nothing that couldn't be fixed. The physical evidence of the accident was minor compared to the emotional impact. Yet even that minor damage served as a reminder of how suddenly life could change. Through it all, Layla reflected on the kindness around her. Strangers had stepped in, offering help without hesitation. Her friends had arrived quickly, providing comfort and reassurance. And John Cena, someone she had only ever seen on screens, had come to ensure she was safe. It was a moment that reminded her of the unpredictability of life, how fear and danger could appear without warning, and yet, how support and care could arrive just as unexpectedly. She thought about the biker, too, the man whose reckless behavior had caused this ordeal. While anger and frustration were natural, she tried to focus on the positive. The fact that she was safe, that her baby was fine, and that she had the support of those around her, made her realize that sometimes it wasn't the actions of the reckless that defined a moment, but the responses of those who chose to step in. As the paramedics finished their final checks and prepared to leave, Layla felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. She was surrounded by care, compassion, and concern. It wasn't just the physical help, it was the emotional support, the calming words, and the reassurance that she wasn't alone. Moments like this, she realized, were powerful reminders of the human capacity for empathy and kindness. John Cena offered her a final nod before stepping back slightly, giving her and her friends space. His presence had been comforting, grounding, and steady throughout the ordeal. Even as he moved away, the sense of reassurance lingered. Layla's heart, though still slightly shaky, felt steadier. She had faced fear, shock, and vulnerability, and had come through it with support, care, and a reminder that humanity could shine brightest in unexpected moments. For Layla, that day in the park would be remembered not just for the accident, but for the way strangers and friends came together in a moment of crisis. It was a lesson in courage, compassion, and the small yet meaningful ways people could make a difference. And while the memory of the biker's recklessness would linger, it was overshadowed by the kindness, care, and calm that had surrounded her in the aftermath. Even as the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting a golden glow over the park, Layla felt a quiet sense of hope. She had been frightened, but she had also witnessed something beautiful, an example of human decency and courage that she would carry with her for a long time. It was a reminder that even in moments of fear and uncertainty, there were always people willing to stand up, to help, and to make a difference, no matter how small it might seem. And in that quiet moment, sitting on the bench, cradling her baby bump, surrounded by friends and kind strangers, Layla realized something profound, that even in a world full of unpredictability and danger, moments of true care and compassion could make all the difference. Layla had begun to feel a little calmer, but the fear from the accident still lingered like a shadow over her. Her friends stayed close, offering support and making sure she was comfortable in her wheelchair. While the paramedics had confirmed that both she and the baby were physically okay, the emotional impact of the incident still weighed heavily on her. Every time she recalled the sudden crash, her chest tightened and her hands trembled. The park, which had moments ago felt safe and peaceful, now seemed to carry an undercurrent of unease. John Cena, sensing that the immediate danger had not been fully addressed, shifted his focus toward the source of the chaos, the biker. Even though the man had sped off briefly after hitting Layla, he had not gone far. From a distance, Cena could see the biker hesitating near the park's entrance, glancing nervously around as if deciding whether to leave the area entirely. His behavior was suspicious, and Cena's intuition told him that the man might not have fully grasped the seriousness of his actions, or worse, that he might try to avoid taking responsibility. With calm determination, Cena began walking toward the biker, his presence immediately drawing attention. People in the park began watching, whispering to one another about what was unfolding. Some could hardly believe that John Cena himself was approaching the man who had caused such fear and chaos. There was a subtle tension in the air, a mixture of curiosity, concern, and the faint thrill of witnessing someone famous take control of a tense situation in real life. Cena approached with a measured stride, making it clear that he intended to confront the biker, but without escalating violence. He stopped a safe distance away, speaking firmly but clearly. "Hey," he said, his voice calm but authoritative. "You just hit a woman in a wheelchair. Do you realize how dangerous and reckless that was?" The biker flinched slightly, clearly startled by Cena's sudden appearance and commanding tone. He opened his mouth to speak but hesitated, realizing quickly that he couldn't bluff his way out of this confrontation. The biker tried to explain himself, stammering through excuses about losing control of the bike and not seeing Layla in time. Cena listened for a moment but didn't interrupt. He let the biker finish, but the tone in his voice made it clear that he was disappointed. Not threatening, just firm. "That's not enough," Cena said calmly. "People's lives were at risk. You endangered her, her baby, and everyone around here. That's not acceptable. You need to take responsibility for what you've done." Nearby witnesses had begun recording the interaction on their phones, murmuring in disbelief. Many were impressed by how composed Cena remained, handling the confrontation without raising his voice or losing control. He wasn't trying to punish the biker with anger or aggression. He was holding him accountable, making it clear that reckless behavior has consequences, especially when it puts innocent people in danger. The biker's expression shifted from defensiveness to guilt. He could no longer hide from what he had done. Sweat was visible on his forehead, and he avoided Cena's direct gaze, realizing that he could not simply walk away from this moment without facing the truth. His reckless action had consequences, and the presence of someone like John Cena, calm but unyielding, made it impossible to dismiss them. Meanwhile, Layla watched from her wheelchair, flanked by her friends. She felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, gratitude, and still a lingering edge of fear. Seeing Cena stand up for her, confronting the man who had caused her harm, gave her a sense of empowerment. She realized that even in situations where she had felt powerless, there were people willing to act decisively to protect others. It was a small but profound reminder that courage and integrity could appear in unexpected places. Cena continued to speak, making it clear that the biker would be held accountable. "You need to apologize to her," he said, motioning toward Layla. "And you need to accept that what you did was wrong. People have to be responsible for their actions." The biker hesitated but eventually walked toward Layla, mumbling a weak apology. The words were awkward, almost forced, but Cena didn't let it slide. He emphasized the importance of sincerity and responsibility, ensuring that the biker understood the impact of his actions. As the biker stood near Layla, Cena maintained a careful watch. He kept his tone calm, but there was a firmness in his stance that left no room for argument. It wasn't about intimidation, it was about accountability. By holding the man's attention and making him recognize his wrongdoing, Cena ensured that Layla's safety and dignity were prioritized above all else. The crowd around them watched closely, some quietly nodding in approval at Cena's approach. The way he handled the situation was a lesson in itself. You could confront wrongdoings without aggression, you could demand accountability without violence, and you could protect someone vulnerable simply by stepping forward with courage and composure. Layla felt a wave of reassurance wash over her. The fear and anxiety that had been simmering in her chest began to ease. She realized that she wasn't alone, not just because of her friends who stayed by her side, but because there were people willing to act decisively in the face of danger. Seeing someone as prominent and respected as John Cena take her side, not for fame or attention, but because it was the right thing to do, gave her a renewed sense of safety. The biker, now fully aware that the situation was serious, began to take responsibility more earnestly. He apologized again, this time with a bit more sincerity, acknowledging the danger he had caused and the fear he had instilled. Cena nodded slightly, signaling that while the apology was a start, it was not the end of the matter. The authorities needed to be involved, and the incident would not simply be forgotten. As Cena spoke with the biker, Layla's friends helped her gather her scattered belongings. The atmosphere in the park had shifted from chaos and fear to cautious calm and reflection. People were still watching, but there was a sense of relief. Relief that the immediate threat had been addressed and that someone had taken a stand to ensure accountability. Paramedics had finished their checkup, but they stayed nearby in case anything changed. They reassured Layla that while the physical impact was minor, emotional recovery might take longer, and it was okay to feel shaken after such an incident. Layla nodded, realizing that her anxiety wasn't a sign of weakness but a natural response to a frightening situation. Having Cena there, someone who handled the situation with care and calm, helped normalize her feelings and gave her courage to process what had happened. Cena remained close. Even as the authorities were contacted to handle the biker, he spoke softly to Layla, asking if she was feeling okay and explaining what would happen next. "You're doing great," he said. "They're going to take care of everything and you'll be safe. You've been through a scary moment, but you handled it with courage." His words were reassuring, emphasizing her strength rather than her vulnerability. Layla took a deep breath, realizing that she was no longer alone in dealing with the aftermath. There was care, protection, and support surrounding her. The park, which had moments ago felt like a place of danger, now seemed safe again. Her fear had not vanished entirely, but it had transformed into a cautious awareness, grounded in the knowledge that help could come when it was needed most. People around them continued to record and talk quietly, sharing their astonishment at the way Cena had intervened. Social media posts would later show how calmly and effectively he had confronted the situation, making it a moment of inspiration for many. But for Layla, it wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about safety, dignity, and the reminder that people could act with integrity and courage when it mattered most. Even as the authorities approached to speak with the biker, Cena stayed briefly with Layla, offering comfort and support. He reminded her to take things slowly, to focus on her breathing, and to remember that she had already navigated a frightening and challenging situation with courage. The reassurance was simple but powerful, giving her a sense of stability amidst the lingering chaos of the moment. Layla's friends expressed their gratitude, both to Cena and to the strangers who had assisted. They had witnessed something remarkable, not just a celebrity acting with care, but a human response to danger, fear, and vulnerability. It was a reminder that acts of courage and compassion could come from anyone at any time, and that such moments could leave lasting impressions on the people involved. The biker, now fully aware of the seriousness of his actions, was guided by the authorities, ensuring that he would face the consequences appropriately. Cena stayed long enough to make sure the situation was under control before finally stepping back, allowing the professionals to take over. His presence had shifted the dynamic of the incident entirely, from fear and chaos to accountability and reassurance. Layla, sitting in her wheelchair and surrounded by friends and caring strangers, felt an immense sense of relief. The emotional weight of the accident was heavy, but she now had a renewed understanding of courage and protection. She realized that even in moments of vulnerability, support could appear, often from unexpected sources, and as the park slowly returned to its normal rhythm, the memory of the biker's recklessness began to fade, replaced by the presence of those who had acted decisively and with care. Layla's fear, though still present, was now tempered with a sense of hope and gratitude. She had been frightened, but she had also witnessed courage, compassion, and accountability in action, lessons she would carry with her long after that afternoon ended. After the biker was taken away by the authorities, the park slowly began to return to its usual rhythm. Children's laughter and the occasional bark of dogs gradually filled the air again, blending with the soft rustling of leaves in the warm afternoon breeze. But for Layla, the events of the last hour lingered vividly in her mind. Even though the physical danger had passed, the emotional impact remained. Her chest still tightened occasionally, and her hands shook slightly whenever she recalled the sudden crash. It was hard to believe that a moment of ordinary park-going had transformed into an experience that had tested her courage, patience, and emotional strength. Layla's friends stayed close, helping her navigate through the crowd and gather her belongings. The spilled groceries had been mostly recovered, but some of the items were crushed or torn. It didn't matter much, though. The real challenge wasn't the apples or the bread. It was processing the fear, vulnerability, and relief all at once. One of her friends gently placed a comforting hand on her arm. "You did so well," she said softly. "I know it was scary, but you stayed strong." Layla nodded, her lips trembling slightly as she tried to smile. John Cena had stayed nearby until he was certain that everything was under control. He had reassured Layla, comforted her, and even helped direct some of the onlookers who wanted to be helpful without getting in the way. His presence had been steady and calming, like an anchor in the storm that had suddenly upended her quiet afternoon. Now he stepped back slightly, giving space to her friends and the authorities, but he still offered a final word of encouragement. "You're strong," he said. "It's okay to feel shaken, but remember how you handled this. You did everything right." Layla felt a swell of gratitude. It wasn't just about the reassurance, it was about the calm, grounded energy he had brought into the situation. It reminded her that courage wasn't about never being afraid. It was about facing fear, accepting support, and moving forward even when you felt vulnerable. In the quiet moments that followed, sitting in her wheelchair, surrounded by the familiar comfort of her friends, she began to breathe a little easier. The paramedics, who had stayed until they were certain that she was safe, gave her some final advice. "You're okay physically," one of them said kindly, "but emotional recovery takes time. You might feel anxious when you think about the accident, and that's completely normal. It's important to take things slow and be kind to yourself." Layla nodded, feeling the truth of their words settle inside her. It wasn't just her body that needed care. Her mind and heart needed attention too. Her friend suggested moving to a quieter spot in the park, away from the lingering onlookers and the faint hum of curiosity that still echoed from the crowd. They found a shaded area near a small fountain, where the gentle sound of flowing water offered a calming backdrop. Layla rolled her wheelchair into the shade and took a deep breath, letting the warmth of the sun fade into a more gentle, soothing light. Her friends handed her a bottle of water, tissues, and helped adjust her bag. Every small gesture of care made her feel more grounded, more capable of processing what had happened. As she sat there, Layla's thoughts drifted back to the moment of impact. She replayed it in her mind. The sudden crash, the fear that had gripped her chest, the moment of helplessness, and then the presence of someone stepping in to protect and support her. It had been terrifying, but it had also been a moment that revealed the power of human kindness. The fear and adrenaline had been intense, but the calm and support that followed had been equally strong, offering a sense of balance in a world that suddenly seemed unpredictable. Layla thought about John Cena again. It wasn't just that he was famous. It was that he had chosen to act with integrity and compassion without hesitation. That realization stayed with her. In that moment, she understood something important. Courage wasn't about fame or strength. It was about presence, awareness, and action when someone needed help. Seeing that in real life, rather than on a screen, made the lesson all the more profound. Her friends encouraged her to take slow, deep breaths, reminding her that it was okay to feel a mix of emotions. "It's normal to be shaken," one of them said. "But look at what you went through. You were scared, but you handled it. You're strong and you're going to be okay." Layla absorbed their words, feeling a quiet sense of pride. She had survived a frightening experience and emerged physically unharmed, with her baby safe and her dignity intact. That realization gave her a renewed sense of confidence. The park around her continued its slow return to normalcy. People walked by with a sense of cautious attention, aware that something unusual had happened here but relieved that no one had been seriously hurt. Children ran along the paths again, their laughter filling the air. Dogs played near the fountain, chasing after thrown balls. The ordinary rhythm of life gradually returned, reminding Layla that even after moments of fear and chaos, normalcy could be restored. But the memory of the biker's recklessness lingered. It was a reminder of how quickly life could change, how easily ordinary moments could turn dangerous. Layla thought about the importance of awareness, safety, and the kindness of those who acted when needed. She realized that while fear could appear suddenly, so could support, protection, and human decency. It was a balance she hadn't fully appreciated before that day. Her thoughts shifted to the baby growing inside her. The small movements in her belly reminded her of what was truly precious, what needed care and protection. She felt a surge of determination to stay strong, not just for herself, but for her child. The incident had been frightening, but it had also reinforced her resilience, her ability to remain calm in the face of fear, and the importance of relying on the support of others. Layla's friends helped her gather her groceries and secure her belongings. Each small act of assistance, from adjusting her bag to offering water and words of comfort, reinforced the sense of care that had surrounded her. Even strangers who had stopped to help earlier lingered for a few moments, ensuring that she was okay before moving on. The gestures weren't grand, but they were powerful. They reminded her that kindness didn't have to be dramatic. It could be simple, quiet, and consistent. As the afternoon wore on, Layla began to feel a sense of emotional release. She let herself acknowledge the fear, the panic, and the vulnerability she had experienced, but she also allowed herself to feel gratitude, relief, and a quiet sense of empowerment. She had been frightened, yes, but she had faced the situation, received support, and survived intact. It was a reminder that human connection and compassion could transform even the most frightening moments. She glanced toward where the biker had been taken away and felt a sense of closure. The authorities were handling the situation, ensuring that he would face the consequences of his actions. There was a sense of justice in knowing that reckless behavior would not go unchecked. That accountability existed even in a world that often felt unpredictable. Layla's friends encouraged her to take a slow stroll along the park paths, just to stretch and regain a sense of normalcy. She moved slowly in her wheelchair, feeling the warmth of the sun, the gentle breeze, and the subtle sounds of life continuing around her. Each turn of the wheel, each small movement, reminded her that life was continuing, that ordinary moments could return, and that she could regain a sense of peace. As she rolled past the fountain, she took a moment to watch the water sparkle in the sunlight. The scene was simple, beautiful, and grounding. It reminded her that even after chaos and fear, life could be calm and beautiful again. It was a visual metaphor for resilience, recovery, and hope. The memory of the accident would stay with her, yes, but so would the memory of the care, compassion, and courage that had followed it. John Cena, who had quietly remained nearby earlier, had moved on to his own activities, but the impact of his presence stayed with Layla. She understood that moments of kindness, courage, and support could appear unexpectedly, and that they could leave lasting impressions. It wasn't about fame. It was about the decision to act, to protect, and to care when someone needed help. That lesson stayed with her as she continued to navigate the park, feeling a mixture of relief, gratitude, and quiet strength. Layla paused again, placing her hands gently on her belly and taking a deep breath. She reflected on the day, the accident, and the way it had unfolded. Fear had arrived suddenly, uninvited, and had shaken her confidence. But support, compassion, and courage had also arrived suddenly, restoring her sense of safety and hope. It was a reminder that even in moments of unpredictability, there were people willing to step in, and that kindness could transform fear into reassurance. By the time the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the park, Layla felt a renewed sense of calm. The event had been frightening, yes, but it had also been transformative. She had learned about resilience, the importance of care, and the unexpected ways in which courage could appear. She realized that life could be unpredictable, but there was always the potential for hope, support, and human kindness to shine through. Surrounded by friends, feeling the warmth of the late afternoon sun and reflecting on the lessons of the day, Layla understood something profound. Fear could be overwhelming, but compassion and courage could be equally powerful. She had experienced both extremes in a short span of time, and the experience had left her stronger, more aware, and more grateful for the people who chose to act when it mattered most. Days passed since the incident at the park, but the memory of that afternoon lingered vividly in Layla's mind. She often found herself replaying the accident in her head, the sudden jolt of the motorcycle, the fear that gripped her chest, and the way her body had felt both vulnerable and powerless. Yet alongside those memories of fear were brighter, more comforting images. The kindness of strangers, the gentle reassurance of her friends, and the calm, commanding presence of John Cena, who had stepped in to protect her when she felt most alone. Layla's recovery was ongoing, but not just physically. Emotionally, she was learning to process what had happened, to let go of the lingering panic and to focus on the lessons the experience had offered. Each day, she reminded herself that she had survived a dangerous situation and had done so with courage, even if she hadn't felt brave in the moment. Courage, she realized, wasn't about never being afraid. It was about facing fear, asking for help when needed, and moving forward despite uncertainty. Her baby, too, had become the center of her renewed focus. Feeling the little kicks and rolls in her belly reminded her why resilience mattered so much. Every movement was a reminder that life was precious, fragile, and worth protecting. The incident had been frightening, but it had also reinforced her determination to create a safe, loving environment for her child. She realized that her own strength, combined with the support of others, could carry her through even the scariest challenges. Layla's friends continued to support her as she regained her sense of normalcy. They accompanied her on walks, helped with errands, and made sure she never felt alone in her recovery. Their quiet presence was a reminder that human connection, care, and empathy were often the most powerful tools in navigating difficult moments. Even small gestures, a hand on her shoulder, a warm smile, or an encouraging word, made a lasting impact on her emotional well-being. News of the incident had spread through the local community, amplified by witnesses who had shared videos and accounts online. People expressed admiration not just for Layla's composure, but also for John Cena's intervention. Many highlighted the importance of stepping in when someone was in danger, emphasizing that courage and responsibility could appear in anyone, not just in the media or on television. For Layla, though, it wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about the profound reminder that help could arrive unexpectedly, and that people could act decisively in moments of need. As Layla reflected on the events, she thought about the biker as well. He had faced consequences for his reckless behavior, and she felt a mixture of relief and hope that he had at least learned a valuable lesson. While she didn't wish harm upon him, she understood the importance of accountability. Actions have consequences, and recognizing that truth was part of what allowed her to feel closure. It reminded her that justice wasn't always about punishment. It was about awareness, responsibility, and learning from mistakes. Layla also found herself thinking deeply about kindness and courage in everyday life. The incident had been extreme, yes, but it had revealed truths about humanity that she hadn't considered fully before. Strangers who stopped to help, friends who stayed close, and someone willing to act decisively without expecting recognition. All of these gestures were part of a tapestry of compassion that gave her hope. She realized that courage didn't always roar. Sometimes it quietly supported, protected, and reassured those in need. The park became a place of reflection for her. A week after the incident, Layla returned with her friends for a quiet visit. The paths were familiar, and the benches still carried the warmth of sunlight. Sitting near the fountain, she watched children run freely and families enjoy simple moments. She felt a mixture of nostalgia and calm, a sense that life had regained its ordinary rhythm, but that the lessons of the past days would stay with her forever. Layla's own confidence had grown in ways she hadn't expected. Before the accident, she sometimes felt constrained by her pregnancy and the temporary limitations of her mobility. But surviving such a sudden, frightening situation had revealed a new layer of inner strength. She realized that fear didn't have to define her experience. She could acknowledge it, accept it, and still continue forward with grace and resilience. That realization gave her a sense of empowerment she would carry into motherhood and beyond. Even in her quiet moments, Layla reflected on the importance of action. Seeing someone step in on her behalf had left a profound mark. She understood that life was unpredictable, and danger could appear suddenly, but so could protection and support. The courage of one person, calm and deliberate, had changed the course of her day, ensuring safety and restoring a sense of security. It was a lesson in the power of presence, awareness, and decisive action that she would remember always. In the days that followed, Layla also thought about the ripple effects of her experience. She realized that witnessing courage and kindness could inspire others to act similarly. Even small gestures, helping someone up, offering reassurance, standing up for the vulnerable, could create a chain reaction of support and care. Her experience had been frightening, yes, but it had also highlighted the potential for humanity to rise to the occasion when it mattered most. Layla's friends encouraged her to share her story, not for attention but to remind others that help and courage could exist in real-life moments. Slowly, she began to recount the incident in small conversations, emphasizing the importance of kindness, accountability, and support. People listened with empathy, many expressing admiration for how she had handled the situation and gratitude for the reminder that ordinary humans could demonstrate extraordinary courage. Her reflections also included the physical and emotional strength it took to recover. Each day, as she carefully navigated her movements and took precautions, she reminded herself of her resilience. The accident had been a test, not just of her physical safety, but of her emotional stability, her awareness, and her ability to accept help when it was offered. She understood that resilience wasn't about facing challenges alone. It was about leaning on support, learning from the experience, and continuing forward with a renewed sense of confidence. Layla often replayed the moment when John Cena had approached the biker. It was more than just the intervention itself. It was the calm authority, the unwavering presence and the insistence on accountability that struck her most. He hadn't shouted, he hadn't become aggressive. He had simply done what was necessary to protect her and ensure the situation was handled responsibly. That approach left a lasting impression on her about the kind of courage that mattered: quiet, deliberate, and effective. In her quieter moments, Layla felt a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude for her friends who had stayed by her side, for the strangers who had offered assistance, and for the unexpected hero who had intervened when she needed it most. She realized that even in frightening situations there was potential for kindness, support, and hope. The accident had been a stark reminder of vulnerability, but it had also highlighted the beauty of human empathy and care. Layla's perspective on life subtly shifted after that day. She became more aware of her surroundings, more appreciative of the small moments, and more committed to noticing when others might need help. She understood that danger and fear were part of life, but so were compassion and courage. Those lessons shaped her approach to her pregnancy, her relationships, and even the simple ways she interacted with strangers in everyday life. One afternoon, she returned to the park alone, quietly reflecting on the journey she had been through. Sitting by the fountain, feeling the sun on her face and the gentle breeze against her skin, she allowed herself a moment of peace. The park no longer felt threatening. It felt like a space where life continued, unpredictable yet beautiful. She remembered the fear, the pain, and the panic, but she also remembered the reassurance, the care, and the courage that had followed. Those memories balanced one another, leaving her with a deep sense of resilience and hope. Layla realized that life would continue to present challenges, but she was stronger now. She had faced fear and vulnerability head-on, received help from unexpected sources, and emerged not just physically unharmed but emotionally wiser. The experience had shown her that humanity, in its quiet acts of courage and compassion, could transform fear into hope, uncertainty into reassurance, and vulnerability into empowerment. In the weeks that followed, Layla continued to grow her connection with her friends, her community, and her own inner strength. Each day was a reminder of the lessons she had learned in the park, the value of kindness, the importance of accountability, and the strength that comes from facing fear with support. She often thought of that afternoon as a turning point, not just in her pregnancy, but in her understanding of what courage, care, and human connection truly meant. And when the day came for her to finally hold her baby in her arms, she felt a profound sense of gratitude and empowerment. The tiny life she cradled was a testament to resilience, hope, and the protective care that had surrounded her during one of the most frightening moments of her life. She had faced fear, received support, and witnessed courage, and now she could pass that legacy forward through her actions, her compassion, and the love she would provide to her child. Layla smiled softly, understanding that life was unpredictable, sometimes frightening, but also full of opportunity for courage, kindness, and human connection. She had survived, she had learned, and she had grown stronger. The incident in the park would always be part of her story, but it would not define her fear. It would define her strength, her gratitude, and the reminder that help,